Go ahead and call this meeting to order of the July 1 Finance and Operations Committee meeting. Welcome, everyone. I heard there was some excitement today with lack of power or internet and air conditioning at 54 Meadow Street. So I hope you all weathered that. We'll go ahead and get started. The one thing I will say is that I'm going to move because I think these are going to generate some conversation. I'm going to move to the bottom of the action items, Amendment 5.3 with SJ Services, and then the renewal options 4.8 and 4.9 for ABM and SJ, just so that those that are presenting on other items will have the option of leaving once their items are done and not being held up until the end of those. So just wanted to make sure if there's no objection from the committee, we'll go ahead and move those 5.3, 4.8, and 4.9 down to just the end of the action items. And speaking of, we'll just jump right into it. First are the information only items. Are there any comments or questions related to any of these? All right, I had none either. We'll move on into the abstract. So the first one, abstract 3.1, the Arabic QFI grant. Ms. Haxey?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm in Tokyo with the kids right now. So it's 5:30 in the morning here. We're having a fantastic time. It's our second to last day. Tomorrow we come back. So this is a grant that we've been working with these grant foundation since 2018. This year we've asked them just to fund 2 part-time positions, and they give us $1,000 each for food and supplies for the Arabic festivals at Wilbur Cross, Hill Regional Career, and Jepson, where we have Arabic programs. And in kind, all we have to do, they allow us to use our existing Arabic teachers that are already working with us. So there's no out of pocket for us.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to these? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you for calling in while you're on this cool trip. Just want to say thank you for forming this relationship, and I appreciate strong partners who are able to work with the district and serve our students and teachers in this way. So thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. And for this program, yes, it's a good one. We'll move on to 3.2, which is the Alliance Increasing Educator Diversity Grant. Ms. Diggs, or let's see, Ms. Diggs is on here. Somebody else can speak to this?
Mr. Wilcox, I can actually speak on behalf. If you can hear me, I apologize. I have some background noise. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So ultimately, this is a set aside for the Alliance grant to be able to provide some funding to be able to help with certification for our students and being able, not for our students, for our educators, enough to be able to increase our diversity within our workforce. Ms. Diggs has come before us to talk a little bit about the 2 residency programs, but this is the actual grant in its total for the set aside.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? I had none either, so thanks for stepping in. We'll move on to 3.3, which is the School-Based Health Center grant. This is listed as Ms. Peters.
Mr. Wilcox.
She just came into the meeting. I'm pulling her up now.
Thank you. All right, welcome, Ms. Peters, and we were just getting to the abstract for the school-based health center grant. And you're on mute. Um,
Unmute. Okay.
oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is for the abstract for the school-based health centers.
Yes.
Okay. So the amount for the coming year has been the same. We're on a 5-year continuation grant from DPH. So the amount is the same as it was last year, 1,344,594. And that grant will support 11 school-based health centers and 6 dental clinics. And it also in the abstract and the accompanying contracts or agreements that we go over today, it includes the agreement amount for our 4 partners, which is Yelmer Haven Hospital, Cornell Scott, Fairhaven Community Health Center, and Clifford Beers, as well as supports the salaries of the director and our lead dental hygienist.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? I had none either, so thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next abstract, which is 3.4, which is the Child and Daycare Center Infant Toddler Grant. Ms. Diaz-Valencia.
I'm going to present on her behalf.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is the child daycare program, which is run. We are the pass-through for this. So the sub-grantees are LULAC, Head Start, Morning Glory, Early Learning Center, Montessori School in Edgewood, and the Friends Center for Children. These are the infant toddler programs, and they provide care, full-time, part-time, and wraparound services. The total is $2,214,161. In the document, it's broken down by each site. And these allocations are determined by the Office of Early Childhood.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions from the committee? And I had none either, so we will move on to 3.5, which is the Family Resource Center Program Grant. And this is listed as Ms. Rodriguez or Ms. Joseph Lumpkin.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez is in the audience. We can bring her in as soon as possible if necessary. So the Family Resource Centers are located at 4 schools: Hill Central, Fairhaven, Brennan, and Wexler. We also have one that's funded separately through Title I Act Troop School. These centers, usually located in the community, we applied for them to be located at schools so that we are able to provide the component requirements of the grant based in our schools, as well as in a larger community. And these components are they're an education component for young children. We are required to provide after-school programming through this grant, some summer vacation programming, positive youth development, support and training for family care providers as they prepare their students for our preschool and kindergarten. We provide a multiple sets of workshops, activities, supports to families of young children. We collaborate with the Early Childhood Office on much of this work. We were really excited to be approached by the Department on Infant Mental Health to join in identifying and screening students who may have additional needs that might not be easily identified if parents are not necessarily looking or aware of those issues. So this is year 2 of a 2-year grant. We have won the grant for 2 years, but we are required to come back with the abstract after the first year and at the beginning of the new year, and present again to you what we presented a year ago.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? I had none either, and thank you for all of you for applying for these grants. We'll move on into the agreements, which often the grants are helping pay for. So we will first talk about 4.1, which is an agreement with Yale New Haven for one of our school health centers. Ms. Peters?
Yes, hi. Yeah, one of our partners, been long-term partners, Yale New Haven Hospital, and that is for 367-289, again, funded through that DPH grant, the abstract I referred to. They oversee 5 school-based health centers, or staff them, I should say. No dental, but they provide office manager, mental health services, as well as medical services at 5 school-based health centers.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions from the committee? I had sent a question earlier, but because of the internet issues at Meadow Street, I don't know if you were able to get it. But question I had is if you could just provide us a quick overview of the Medicaid reimbursement part of these, for this one in particular, but also because this works in all the school-based health centers, I believe. My understanding is that they're responsible for seeking reimbursement, and then they use those funds to support or expand their services on behalf of this health center. And then they notice how much this is doing. And my guess is my understanding of that correct? And then just is this separate from whatever Medicaid billing the district is doing that we outsource to an outside vendor?
Okay, so they're 2 separate things, and I'll hopefully clarify the billing piece. About 10 years ago, 11 years ago, New Haven did the billing for a lot of the services because we ran most of them ourselves. When we outsourced to our 4 partners, the grant we received has been flat funded. Even the one we have now is not going to increase over the next 3 years. And certainly with the increased costs, particularly of staffing, like nurse practitioners are now about $120,000 a year. So that grant will never cover even close to, half of what it would cost just for staffing alone, let alone all of the other things. As well as, Yale New Haven is not unlike the other partners where we get that funding from DPH for 11 school-based health centers that the state they defined who got it. They told us who it can support. So Yale has a couple of school-based health centers where they actually provide everything. They don't get any money from me or the district. They do that themselves. So in exchange, they have been allowed to bill for eligible services that from, students. There's no copay, there's nothing, the families never get a bill. But eligible services, yes, they do bill primarily from Husky or Medicaid. And when they do provide us with kind of a report how much they do bring in mental health and medical and dental. But there's also, we put in our contract at the very end what is allowable to put that money into, like staffing, salaries, benefits, supplies, that kind of thing. They can't just use it to upgrade hospital beds, so it has to go back into our program, into those clinics. So the Medicaid billing is for them. That's how it's done, so that they can actually break even, or there's really not a huge moneymaker for them, but it does offset the costs, it's particularly of salaries and benefits. The other piece to your question about Medicaid and outsourcing to a vendor, that's a separate issue. The only billing that I outsource for is for our dental services, not for school-based health centers, just dental, because that's a self-sustaining program in the district that we started about 5 years ago. We get no real money for that. With Seal Connecticut, we get small grants, but otherwise everything to sustain that program comes from our reimbursement for dental services. And so we have a billing company that we use to maximize our reimbursements from Medicaid for dental services, only for our dental clinics that I'm involved with. It has nothing to do with the school-based health center services. Does that answer the question?
It certainly answered mine. Thank you. And then the other thing I just wanted to point out was that somebody did point out to me that issues around there's increases in what Medicaid will cover, and I just wanted to. I sent an article around today to the superintendent, Ms. DeMayo, and I think Dr. Finley. So maybe it could be forwarded to whoever else is involved in Medicaid billing about just schools leaving money on the table. In terms of getting the reimbursements, I don't think that's an issue here because we're using this third-party company that gets a small piece of whatever they get for us. And so I'm sure they're quite motivated to help us maximize our billing because it maximizes their ability.
Exactly. More we make, more they make.
So, Ms. Jackson, you have your hand up?
Oops. Sorry, we also do some Medicaid billing for students with disabilities. Again, some of what you're referring to, Mr. Wilcox, is true that we do have companies who are helping us to maximize billing. I will tell you, and this may be a part of the article that you're referring to, in order to actually maximize what you're actually receiving, there have been a lot more requirements in the last couple of years in order to get reimbursements. And I know Sue sees that on her end as well. But just to let you know, there's some other Medicaid reimbursement for students with disabilities.
Okay. Thank you very much for the overview. And hearing nothing else on this item, we'll jump to 4.2, which is an agreement with Clifford Beers Guidance Clinic. Ms. Peters.
Okay, and that's for 83,958. And they provide, Clifford Beers provides mental health services full-time with Spanish-speaking therapists at 2 of our school-based health centers, Clinton Avenue and Fairhaven, and they've been wonderful. We've actually had to decrease the amount given to everybody by a small percentage because increases in costs have gone up across the board so much. So it's just a small decrease to them, but that's their contract right now, agreement for this year.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Hearing nothing, let's jump to the Cornell Scott Health Center.
Okay, Cornell Scott, their amount is $400,400. They oversee or they staff 6 school-based health centers, and they also provide some dental now. As I mentioned, they get support for some of our DPH funded sites, but they've also opened some just on their own, like Reggie Mayo. We don't provide money for Reggie Mayo. They're opening at they're at Truman. They're taking over Catherine Brennan. The health department stepped back or relinquished their license for Brennan Rogers. So Cornell stepped up, and they're going to take that medical piece over, which is great because really it's been challenging as schools get fewer and fewer students as they some of them become smaller. It's really, really hard to justify having someone in there full time. But anyway, they've taken that on, for example. So that's the amount that they are getting for this year, for $400,400.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Hearing none, we'll jump to, looks like the last of these, which is an agreement with Fairhaven Community Health Center.
Fairhaven is getting $190,843, and they oversee 4 DPH school-based health centers, and they also offer dental. They brought that piece on at some of their schools in the last few years. And they're also taking on non-DPH schools too on their own, like Metro. They're open there, and Bishop Woods and Ross Woodward. So they've really been stepping up and helping us to expand to other sites without any additional funding from us.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Okay, I had none either, and just wanted to say thank you for you and your team's work on all the these health clinics and things in our schools. Very needed.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to 4.5, which is an agreement with the ACES Regionalization Special Education Transportation.
Hi. Yep, so this is an agreement with ACES. It's one of its kind. It's really to provide a lower cost to districts for students that we place in out-of-district placements. Again, just as an example, we may have students who, where the daily rate for transportation may be over $450. It just allows us to have a reduced cost as we're sharing costs of the transportation with other surrounding districts. So ultimately, this is to provide us with a reduced cost in transportation for our students that we transport to our out-of-district programs.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? All right, thank you for this overview. And then my understanding is that, this is, regionalization is the hopes of this is it's saving money for the participating districts, and that ACES does use an RFP process when they're selecting the vendor that they end up using for this. So there's also a process in place for the advantageous pricing.
Yes, on their end as well.
Yeah. So thank you for that information. And we'll move on to 4.6, an agreement with All Point Home Care. Also, Ms. Jackson.
Yep. This is an agreement for a few of our students who require specialized nursing in order to access education. I've been here before. We do have, thankfully, students who are able to come into our schools who do have complex medical needs, but our students who required by way of their individual education plan to be in school with one-to-one nurses. So this is, again, to cover the cost of such service.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none. We'll move on to 4.7, an agreement with Global Interpreting Network. Ms. Haxon, if she's still available.
Looks like we may have lost her.
Ms. Haxley, yes, that's me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was handling summer school stuff. Yeah, so this is our translation services that we use. It's on demand for our schools to utilize. If we're in a PPT or a parent comes in to the office, it offers over 300 languages, and it's widely used by our school personnel.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? I was just going to say thank you. You mentioned that it's widely utilized, and Ms. Haxey provided some utilization. This was used over 2,300 total calls, more than 30,000 total minutes for this service. So it does seem to be getting some use there, which is a good thing. So let's see here. Next would be 4.8, but I said we're going to handle that at the end of the list. And also 4.9. So we will jump into the amendments. The first one is the amendment to the agreement with ACES around assistive technology evaluations. But I think this one needs to be held back for another meeting. There was some questions, and the memo has not been updated to answer some of those questions. So I don't know if there's an update on that, but I think that
Oh, Mr. Wilcox, the memo
Yes.
had been updated, but I'm imagining you may not have received that. But the memo, just to let you know, had been updated.
Yeah, all I'm seeing posted is the memo from June 14th. And there were some questions on June 17th related to that. So I'm thinking we'll hold this until the next meeting, table this until the next meeting, remove it from when I make the motion to send things to the board. So it's a large amendment. There were some questions about it that we just need to get answered before we can move it on. Any comments or questions related to this? Okay, so make note of that when we get to the motion to move things forward. We'll move on to 5.2, which is an amendment to the agreement with Northwest Investment Consulting. Dr. Finley?
Yes, I'm gonna ask that we hold this into the next meeting as well. There's some more research that needs to happen with this particular piece.
All right. So that is being withdrawn for now. So I'm just making notes of this. All right. And I also said 5.3, where we're going to handle at the end of the list. So we'll move on to 5.4, an amendment to the agreement with Windstream Holdings. This is listed as Dr. Finley and Mr. Simeone.
Yes, I don't see Michael. So this is Windstream. Windstream is our telecommunications vendor, and they provide telecommunications to 3 locations: Gateway, and 2 schools within the district. I provided a memo related to this particular piece. This is amendment for 30,000 not to exceed, with the adjusted amount, if approved, 86,000 to 5324. I did research related to this particular topic, and provided the cost drivers. We had a bundle packet at one point during the year, and then that bundle pricing was discontinued, which resulted in a higher cost, connected basically to the internet pieces. Mr. Michael Simeon, he did some research also. He worked with the vendor and identified areas where they had to provide credits, $4,000 credit to our account for looking back at the bills and seeing areas where we shouldn't have been charged. Those particular, that $4,000 will be credited to upcoming bills that we will have moving forward with this particular piece. So amendment for asking amendment for 30,000 for this particular service.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes. I mean, one question is just as I look at this memo, I mean, I don't know that it's written in the format that we use to increase, to do an amount change for contracts. Is this like a different type of is this a different type of scenario for us? Or so I guess my question is, like, why just the memo and not the other accompanying documents? I just see 2 pages in front of me.
All right, I'm just an answer to that. We had requested a memo, or I can't remember if we did it in the committee or just when I was reviewing materials from the last one and sent it in with my questions, that we'll need a memo to explain this. It's a large percentage cost increase, and so we needed to have assurances that the research has been done as to why, and some of that data presented. So you're saying the regular cover memo should also be applied, and I agree. So that's that. So we please need to have that updated, because that has. I'm trying to think. Let me look at what we have. Might have an example.
No, definitely we'll make sure that happens today.
Yeah.
I would also like to add that once we do sign a new agreement with Windstream, that it will go back to our previous monthly rate. So there will be a significant savings going forward. The 30,000 is the overage in what we need to pay Windstream due to the fact that our contract had expired and our credits had our incentives had expired, and it wasn't caught in time.
Were you finished with your questions, Dr. Yarbrough?
No, I mean, that's just a big lapse. That's a big lapse for us. And it seems like it's costing us the 30,000. is there any difference in service that they provided, or is it just that?
No, there's
We
no
weren't
difference. There's no difference in service. It's just contractual. And so once, working with these large telecom companies, it's very difficult to really negotiate satisfactorily with them. So we do need to pay the past due amounts for those invoices, and to before they can move forward in reducing our rate going forward and providing us the credits.
Thank you. And when will the new contract be in place if we choose to go with them? Because I see it looks like these invoice dates end 4/22/24. Like, are we still paying the unbundled price?
Yes, we are still paying the unbundled price. The new contracts are going forward this month. We've received them. There's still some discussion with the finance department because it's a 3-year contract. You get your best rates when you do it over a 3-year period. They want to see 1-year pricing so they don't have to go to the Board of Alders to get approval. So that's what we're getting right now. So hopefully we'll have that by tomorrow, and then we can make a decision to move forward on which alternative we want. Also, it's a 3-year, 36-month contract, but since we are a school system, you could cancel that contract at any time without any penalty. So there's no real contract term that you'll be responsible for after that. So.
Great. Thank you very much.
So a couple things. One is just, a question as to how will we make sure that we catch these things moving forward? I know there's been some issues in this department with staffing and so on. So I'm just wondering, do we have things? And sounds like the biggest thing in place is to get the new contract in place, which will lock in the pricing that's more advantageous to the district. But
Right. You're absolutely correct. That's number one priority. But going forward, I had met initially with the finance department. The person that handles the IT PO process is coming back on next Monday. She was out on leave for several months, so that could have been how it got lost. The contract renewal and the unbundled pricing. But I am going to review all the telecom bills that come in on a monthly basis and approve those before they get paid. And I'll be meeting with the finance department to go over that process, especially within IT, because these telecom companies are notorious for changing the rates or upping the rates without providing sufficient notice, and you really got to keep track of that.
I know when I had cable and internet through my cable company, they like to mess with the rates periodically too. So yeah, I imagine it doesn't change as the numbers get bigger. A couple quick things. One is I would appreciate it, and I'm requesting that you all update the memo that is supplied to have this bit that we just talked about. What's going to be different moving forward, so that information about reviewing things, I think that would be a good thing to add to the memo, and then so a new version of the memo, and have that posted for the Board of Ed meeting during this Friday's posting. The second thing is Dr. Yarbrough did bring up the regular cover memo for amendments, which it's just a 1-pager, but it does have some good information that's there. An example is it was posted for 5.2. So if that could be also added for the materials for this meeting, and then the materials for this item for Friday's meet. I mean, when it's posted for the Board of Ed for next Monday. And Finally, we've had the request from board members that we put the percent increase into the descriptions. And so if we could do that, I guess this is directed towards Ms. DeMayo. So an example of where that could fit, in my opinion, is for this item where it says to increase the funding amount from 56,253, et cetera, to 30,000, have in parentheses a whatever percent increase, 10, 20, 40%, whatever the right number is for each item. And so that sounds like a good thing for any increases. So it would be amendments or change orders. We just put it right in the description so it's very clear. And then I imagine you would be helped with that is if the cover memo form had a spot for the person to put in the percentage. So you don't have to figure it out for each one of these. Okay, is there anything else on this item? Okay. All right. Then we'll move on to the next one, item 6.1, which is a purchase order with Goodwin University. Ms. Natalino?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
So this PO was for the Goodwin University Advanced Manufacturing Mobile Lab to visit 6 of our K-8 schools, focusing on middle schools to expose them to manufacturing as a pipeline to our manufacturing pathway. Approximately, they're there for a full day, and they split classes up so that half visit the lab and half are the other half are in the classroom learning about manufacturing in Connecticut. When they visit the lab, they get to see the machinery, such as the 3D printer, the CNC machines, and students get to ask questions and interact with the mobile lab. This was posted back as the question was, this original PO was back in January. But there was an error. It was submitted and not recognized that it needed to go through. So that was the reason for the lapse that was asked. Right.
All right, comments or questions related to this? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, just generally speaking, thank you for this exposure to manufacturing, kind of hands-on in-person opportunity for our students to maybe in addition to reading something on paper, hearing it discussed, seeing a video about it, actually being able to have a site visit and speak. So just thank you for.
You're welcome. Thank you. And our data does show that we rotate the lab to different schools and that we have an influx and more kids interested in manufacturing and entering our manufacturing pathway when the lab visits. So I have been tracking that.
Excellent.
Yes, so a couple questions that I had, you had addressed why we didn't see this earlier in the year. So we would appreciate it moving forward that we have things on time. My second question was one that was more, more happy, which was about approximately how many students attended or had the benefit of this.
Yes,
I appreciate moving it around so people have a chance to different schools to see it. So
yeah, so Mr. Wilcox, they spent a full day at each school. We prioritize all the 7th and 8th grade classes, but depending on the size of the school, they could also get 5th and 6th grade to visit. So that's why we try to visit every other year. So we know that the middle school students will at least have had the exposure in 7th or 8th grade. But I would estimate between 900 and 1,200 total students between the 6 schools were able to access the lab.
That's wonderful. And one other thing, it's more of a detail, but it says that it appears that university was added to the exempt professional list on question 2 of the cover memo. And my question is this on the list of allowable exempt professionals from city purchasing department? It certainly seems like it'd be a sole source if nothing else. So I'm not worried about it. I'm just wondering about a category.
I will follow up. I did inquire before I filled out the memo and was told yes. That's why I hit exempt.
All right. Thank you very much. That addresses the questions I had. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so 6.2 is purchase order under Omnia contract with Frontline for IEP software license. Ms. Jackson? Or did we lose Ms. Jackson?
I will reach out to her to see to try to get her back on.
Okay, that would be good because there was some questions. I certainly had questions related to 6.3, which is also, oh no, wait, that's Ms. Flegler. Never mind. So this one is just it's the Frontline technology, so it uses to track the IEP software license. I don't know, Dr. Yarbrough, did you have any questions related to this one? We've used this vendor before. We need to keep track of IEPs. If she was here, I would just have a question related to how's it being used, but she has information. I think that it's used to track a few hundred IEPs, or it's used by a few hundred people to track IEPs. I'm trying to remember which from the documentation she provided. So I don't have any questions related to this. And if Dr. Yarbrough doesn't, then we don't have to contact her. Okay. We'll move on to 6.3, which is a purchase order under Omnia, also with Frontline Technologies Group, but for this one is
Flegler.
applicant tracking, etc. So Ms. Flegler.
Good evening, Finance and Operations Committee. So I am here to provide the overview over the Frontline Technologies Education's update for the renewal. So here we have a renewal of our annual services that were provided. And I'm going to probably answer some of your questions in my report out. So what is different about this annual renewal is our Frontline annual renewal, but Frontline Central Solution is one of the solutions that we are renewing. Our previous implementation of the Frontline Central Solution was over a 4-year period, and last year was year 4 of the 4-part payments. This is an annual renewal, so the price is increasingly very high. In addition, we typically over the year would do our annual renewal for 2 of the 4 solutions. We typically don't have the absence and substitute management unlimited usage on this same invoice, but Frontline invoices all under one invoice. So that's another reason why it's significantly higher. You see the 91,000, but I will tell you, just for the Frontline Central Solution, that one solution that we are renewing annually, there was an $18,000 increase. And so with that, we have been looking at exploring other companies for our Frontline for applicant tracking. We did meet with another company, ESS, for our substitute tracking, to manage our substitute tracking process. However, in this current fiscal reality, because we're mitigating, we weren't looking to increase the deficit by spending more money. So if we didn't have enough time to really explore to see if there's another solution that we can consider moving forward. But we are planning to meet with other vendors to see if we can find some other cost savings in the future, because it has been a significant increase in cost, in addition to them bundling a third solution on this one invoice during the annual renewal. And one more thing I want to mention too, the reason why I'm just presenting at this July for the annual renewal that expired June 30 is because we were meeting with other vendors, and again, specifically our substitute tracking, to see if we could separate the two and save some additional funding by removing it from Frontline.
You just went to mute.
Yeah. By see if we could find some savings with another company, and we actually were hoping to explore more with that one company, because we find that we might get a better return on our investment based on having this bundle service. And we're going to talk to Frontline as well, simply because we've been a partner with them for some years now, and the increasing cost is getting higher and higher each year.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this?
Yes.
Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the walkthrough.
No.
Two questions. I think you answered one of them, which is this contract expired June 30th.
Mhm.
Okay. Just want to
Yeah.
get the timeline straight. I mean, so what happens if this is not renewed? I mean, is there an option to go with a company that provides better service within
So,
this month, or is this needs to happen now because it is a significant increase? And I mean, what happens when we ask them to reduce or eliminate the increase?
so of course we can always ask. So the impact would be, this is our applicant tracking system where we use for our postings to post positions for any potential hires that we have. And we also use it as our substitute tracking as well. So when educators or teachers are out, this is the way they track their absences in order to acquire a substitute teacher, because we have the systems designed that when the teacher creates an absence, they're not going to be here for professional development or just being absent, then there's a system that contacts subs virtually and they can accept the assignments while they're out. So, and this is work that we do during the summer for, like, we know that we may have educators that are out on long-term leaves for, medical leave or maternity leave, things like that. Now is the time we recruit ourselves and put them in place so that start of the school year, we can have staff in place. So we do use it during the summer, but primarily at this time, it would be difficult for us to cut off the service, but I do think, because I actually was talking with Executive Director Tiffany Jackson, because we have, that we use it for IEP as well, and the cost seems to increase annually. And so I think we do need to start looking at other vendors to consider. The one other thing that is, timing is important, simply because is going to take a training for the whole district, especially administrators, central office staff, to not only to implement a new system, but to ensure that it is implemented with fidelity and everyone is trained timely in order to continue moving with the work we have to get done throughout the school year.
Thank you. Understood. Thank you very much.
No problem.
All right, so I think you answered my questions, which was the the reason for the cost increases. So we've certainly seen costs when we come out of multi-year contracts increase. We've seen it with a lot of other vendors. And then also you said that it is because previously this would be multiple invoices and they've combined it into one.
Right.
Services that we've been previously using. Okay.
Mhm.
That makes a little more sense. And then just to clarify, we had a multi-year contract with them. This is not a multi-year, because you all want to be able to continue the work on looking at alternatives. And I do agree that making changes in the summer when we're trying to hire people for the fall is going to be challenging. Do you have a sense of the timeline as to when, if you all are going to recommend a change, when that change would be occurring? And
I don't have a sense of a timeline, but we are going to consider some meetings during the summer months, just to kind of explore other companies. And I've actually been looking at other school districts to see where it has been beneficial, and even considering revisiting with Frontline to see if we can reduce some of our services and even to get the continued same support. Frontline Central Solution is so critical for us because we're trying to move away from paper, right? And so Frontline Central Solution allows us to send out virtual new hire packets to our incoming new hires, and so that there's not a lot of paper. And this is kind of implemented right at the cuff of the pandemic, so that it's just not so much paper. We're doing everything virtually to kind of align to our paperless environment. So to answer your question, we are exploring, as far as meeting, will probably be like just getting names out there to see who we can meet to have the conversation. And then we'll have to see if there's an opportunity to save, and what that will look like as far as timeline and implementation. But we don't have a determined timeline at this time, but we are exploring.
all right, thank you.
All right.
Any other comments or questions related to this? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to 6.4. Thank you. And we'll move on to 6.4, which is purchase order with Houghton Mifflin for Read 180, and this is Dr. Sonal Swingler.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. The Read 180 program is what our teachers use to support our students during their intervention period. It is a comprehensive program that offers a differentiated support both at the foundational reading level and also a targeted intervention curriculum that supports reading comprehension. We have been using this program for a number of years, and we are hopeful as the company continues to make improvements to the platform, which we will be using the updated resource this fall of 2024.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this one? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, thank you. So two questions, and it may be in the document, but I don't see it right now. It says that there has been a cost increase.
Yes.
And it's from the increase in the number of student license, I think. What is the amount of that increase from,
So
I guess, last year?
Yes, sir. There was an increase rate of approximately $15,000. It's twofold. One, as I indicated, they have revamped the platform. So we are working with a new and improved platform, and with that came a slight cost increase. And also, after our close examination of the data this year, we have increased the student licensures by a bit. So we are getting a better, more improved platform, which we are again excited to use. And we also are getting a few more licenses to distribute across the district. So that accounts for the cost. The district has known that this cost increase is coming for the last couple of years, and they've been incrementally increasing it for us since prior to our coming, to Genti and I coming. And we've hit the point now where I believe that we've hit the last little jump in cost increase over the last few years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One request specifically for this, and then a more general comment. But the request for this is I would love to see, to the degree that we have it, the data that speak to our students using this and how it benefits them, and the usage around it for the metrics that are important for their development, and just a general comment as I just think about these softwares. So I know that the companies designed them for the softwares to become more and more integrated into the district and into our curriculum processes. And my general question is, and maybe not for conversation today, but just, what are we doing maybe to wean ourselves off of some of these softwares to actually go in the opposite direction? It is the company's plan from the beginning to increase the cost over time, in part because their costs increase, but also because they want their profit to increase. So I'd be curious. So I think everything's going to go up a lot from the different pieces of software that we use. Just a curiosity. But thank you for bringing this forward, and also thank you for answering my question that the software platform is improved, and we also are purchasing additional license for students. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your question. And as Genti and I continue to do the work of literacy leadership across the system, we are also continuing to examine alternatives as part of our ongoing work. So we appreciate your thinking and where you're coming from. And we also look forward to providing you some more details through the data analysis as well. So thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I will say, as someone who licenses information resources from multinational publishing conglomerates, as part of my day job, I can confirm what Dr. Yarbrough was saying is that these folks do increase their prices, and they do want their profits. And H is no different than on that front, that's for sure. A couple little quick things. One is another category question. This is the cover memo lists this as exempt professional, And I think in the past for HMH, it's been sole source. I might be incorrect on that, but I just would like a confirmation that it's the right, correct category. I mean, I do understand this is, you know, it's all part of the 180, and it's part of the state. It's one of the state mandated list of options the district can choose from, and so I'm not concerned about it, but it's just making sure that the details are correct.
I'm not sure if we used it as sole source. I remember when we looked at the K-5 program, we referenced the pilot as backup for HMH, as well as the state mandated list. And so I remember that's what we utilize, but this is a different program in that we're talking about our intervention program.
Okay. Looking over the paperwork here again. Yeah, I guess I just think we need a confirmation, because the exempt professional list, that comes from the city purchasing department. So if we're using that list, we want to make sure that it's correct. So, or
Does
we
that
can
list
provide
cover-
information.
And maybe I'll reach out to Pat to see if that covers all curriculum materials, the professional exempt.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but perhaps.
I'll talk to Pat.
So I think that's something. And if not, we just need, there's other spots where the information can be added as to why, and it's continuing this use. But just think as far as the, you know, expanding information about how the contractor was selected and the reason why we're using them, understanding some of those things. But I just wanted to confirmation on that before Friday. And the second thing I wanted to say, let me check my notes here. Oh, I just wanted to say, while I had somebody on here who's is in responsibility for the literature or literary curriculum, I just wanted to say, completely unrelated to this, I've had the occasion over the last couple of weeks to hear Mr. Charmant Influence Little, the poet laureate of New Haven, speak a few times. I don't know if this individual is being utilized in programming, in our arts programming, or in our literacy programming. I imagine he is, maybe in some ways, but just that's a New Haven resource right there. I believe he's a product of New Haven Public Schools and very powerful. Made me want to go write stuff down, and I imagine anybody else. I went with one of my kids, and they were like feeling very similar. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Definitely noted and taken under advisement. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyways,
Mr.
right.
Wilcox?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question about the exempt professional status. What does that functionally mean in terms of how the contractor is selected? Is there a bid process? Because I'm just thinking it's to our benefit if the contractors understand that they're competing with other contractors as it relates to funding, versus if they think there is no competition or we have no choice. So yeah, how do they experience this component?
So by my understanding, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, it's under city purchasing policy. There is a list of, and these there are examples, are accountants, architects, dentists, engineers, physicians, medical doctors, etc., are in this category of people that are exempt from having to go through the RFP or RFQ process through city purchasing due to the specialized knowledge that they have, etc. Even in that case, people are seeking alternate quotes and things like that. So it's not just, this is the dentist, we like the dentist, and we're never going to look to find if we can get a better deal, but doesn't have to go through that particular process. I think since this is a curricular piece for Read 180, I think that's why I think it's a sole source is what I've seen in the past for these, because if the district has decided that we need to be using Read 180 as one of the state mandated or state approved reading software packages to help teach reading, that then the company that makes the thing is the only provider of that. So I think that that is what I've seen for curricular materials. When we've decided to buy into a whole curriculum package, then the company that makes it is by definition the sole provider of that particular package. And the other thing that I think we probably should, since there's, you know, members of the public and press, et cetera, that watch this, is that there was an entire process, and maybe Ms. Red Hannons or Dr. Swingler could talk about it. There was a whole process where things were looked at and piloted and tested, where teachers and other people were involved in selecting this, and then went through, I believe, presentations, teaching and learning. So it was an involved process. But maybe someone could just add to that.
Well, I don't want to, we did that for the HMHM to reading, the K-5 program, not for Read 180. We've been utilizing Read 180 for well over a decade in New Haven Public Schools. And actually, just in true transparency, we're evaluating all of our intervention programs this year, and that's in alignment with our strategic operating plan. And so you will hear more about the work throughout the year of what we're doing with interventions, but this is carrying over an intervention program that we've utilized over time in New Haven Public Schools.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anything else connected to this one? And we're going to get confirmation on just what the city purchasing is to the proper categorization and so on before Friday. Understanding that this is a holiday week, so it might be Monday before they get that answer, depending on if purchasing's around. I just remembered that. We might want to expedite that. And that's a good point. Ms. DeMayo, a question for you is posting for materials for the board meeting on Monday. Is that Wednesday or is it Friday? Friday is an actual work day, right?
Yes,
Although
it
many
is.
people will take it off with personal time, but okay.
Yes,
So the plan is Friday posting for
Friday posting.
as far as you know? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Item 6.5 is next, purchase order with NWEA for map growth. And this is also Dr. Sonal Swingler.
Thank you again. The NWA MAP Growth Assessment will be our universal screening assessment for students in grades 3 through 10 and as needed for readers in grades 11, 12. This is being proposed to take the place currently of the HMH growth measure, which the company will be retiring. For teachers, NWA MAP growth identifies students who are at or below grade level in reading. It provides identified targeted learning goals through very comprehensive standards-based reports around individual students and trends that we see in classroom data. For administrators and district level administrators, Genti and I both have used NWA MAP in former districts and can attest to the high level of data and the high quality of the comprehensive reports, again, that showcase student growth over time. And we are hopeful with the implementation of this assessment, it will give actionable data to teachers and help our building administrators to track longitudinally. And as Ms. Red Hannons identified earlier, support and grow the work within our MTSS SRBI process. So we are assured that students are getting the support they need for reading intervention. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions connected to this one? All right, I had none either, so we will move on to a purchase order with Scholastic for digital onboarding and maintenance of Lit Camp Literacy Pro. This is listed as Ms. Toussaint.
I'm also speaking on this evening on behalf of Gen 2 Signant.
I'm sorry.
Our work with Lit Pro has been pretty strong this year. It is an online resource that provides students and teachers thousands of fiction and nonfiction books online. We saw an incredible impact of this resource, concentrating during the Superintendent's Reading Challenge this spring, where kids were celebrated and lauded for their hard work in their reading and their reading development. We are also using this as a key resource in our summer school programs this year, and we are seeking the support to continue utilizing this very valuable resource. When you go online, again, just a rich amount of books and texts that can be used both by classroom teachers and most importantly for the readers in our care. Thank you.
All right. Comments or questions? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, thank you for this. I read that the cost has decreased by $500. To what is that attributed?
That's a great question, Dr. Yarbrough. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. This is the quote that was provided to us by Scholastic. So I don't have the detail of why that was decreased at this point. I do see that Genty noted that here, which we can always celebrate a decrease, but I don't know the exact moment of why it decreased. My apologies.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Scholastic is a nice company to do business with. So, my one comment on this one is just that, and this is from Ms. DeMeo, that the description of this doesn't follow our typical format where when a purchase order is done under a contract, this is currently done under the TIPS contract, that's noted in the description. So my suggestion is that just get added for the description when it goes before the board. All right. Next on the list is 6.7, our purchase order with Decisions Ed Group. Mr. Nguyen.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about Decision Ed. This is a platform that brings data from many different sources into one data warehouse so it can be linked and visualized on dashboards and in reports. Allows administrators to make informed data decision. In addition, it allows you to make break down the data by subgroups a whole lot easier than in the past. With our previous platform, you had to make a whole bunch of columns. In this case, you just click on the visualization and it allows you to break down the data by student a whole lot faster. And then there's no increase with this contract from last year to this year. And for the most part, it's been pretty strong in its first year, and we're still making improvements heading into the second year of this contract, if approved.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? I had none either. Ms. Hannons, your hand is up.
There's just one thought that we should keep in mind that I'm seeing as I'm seeing these agreements going through. If you notice, the funding source for the bulk of these agreements are coming from ESSER funding, which is, of course, going away at the end of the fiscal year. So we really need to make sure that we keep these items in the forefront in terms of what we're going to do next fiscal year, because budget season will be right around the corner in October. And a lot of these items that are going through now we would have to look at what we can continue to do with, of course, never enough funding. So I just want to bring that to the forefront now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Many items in many meetings are ESSER funds, which will not be available next year. So,
right.
All right. Makes all the work we need to be doing over the next year to increase funding at the state level that much more important. All right. Next item, purchase order 6.8. This is with E-Rate Online. And this is Dr. Finley and Mr. Is it Simeon?
Yes, Simeon. Yeah, E-Rate is a company that we've been doing business with for several years, and they assist us in helping the school system put together the technology package for the next fiscal year. And E-Rate gets its funding through the through the state, and we pay anywhere between 20 and 90 cents on the dollar on the items that are approved through the E-Rate grant that is provided. Each year, E-Rate adds additional items to their grant process. For example, one year we purchased close to 90 network switches to put in our schools several years ago through E-Rate, and we paid a fraction of the cost on that. So this is for the consulting cost to go through the products that the state is going to provide us grant funding on for technology.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to that? No, I think similar to how we do business with the company that provides Medicaid billing support, anything that helps us leverage these programs better is a very big win. I know sometimes we see things coming through that it's our cost is 50,000 and the true cost is $500,000 because of E-Rate. So because of the E-Rate program and presumably E-Rate Online LLC's assistance in applying for those funds. All right, seeing nothing else on this, we'll move on into contracts. 7.1 is first one's with Tucker Mechanical for on-call chilled water. Mr. Elaine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilcox. Good evening, everyone. This submission is for award of on-call chilled water and air-cooled equipment repair services, contract number 21938 to Tucker Mechanical for an amount not to exceed $225,000. This is going to be funded through capital under general improvements. This was awarded or this was procured through sealed bid number 21938. This is specifically for repair services on all of our chilled water and air-cooled HVAC equipment, so basically air conditioning equipment. This is for the new fiscal year, FY 24 to 25. And that's all I have. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? I bet it's popular with 54 Meadow Street staff that we have on-call chilled water and equipment repair people. Move on to 7.2, an award of a contract also with Tucker Mechanical for preventative maintenance.
Like Mr. Wilcox, not to be confused with the previous contract, this actually separates maintenance from repair services. The previous contract was for repair services. This one is going to be for an amount not to exceed $75,000, contract number 21924 for preventative maintenance of the same equipment. This was also procured through sealed bid number 21924 and funded through capital general improvements. That's all I have for any questions.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either, so let's go ahead and move into change orders. The first one is with Consolidated Electric.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilcox. This is a change order to cover the last invoice for theater maintenance of the year. We had quite a few theater maintenance requests at the end of the year, specifically having to do with theater lighting because events were happening. This particular one was the last one that happened to be pretty expensive. The invoice was for $10,000, $10,948.80. The on-call contract did not have enough money to cover that last particular service that we requested from the vendor. Again, this is not a change order that the vendor sent to us requesting additional funds, but an invoice for services that we requested from the vendor, and we're requesting $6,003.15 to cover that invoice.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Thank you for providing the percent amount. I know you were at the last board meeting and heard the request that we include that moving forward.
Yes, sir.
I had no other comments or questions for this. You've answered the questions that I had. We'll go on to 8.2, which is a no cost change order with Irwin Seating Company.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilcox. This particular project, the agreement for this project is currently sitting with corporate counsel. And as a result, we have to move the date of this particular purchase order that we're requesting over to the next fiscal year. So this is a no cost change order requesting to take this contract and move it from FY 23 to 24 to 24, 25 until as we're waiting for the contracts to be executed fully.
Thank you. Questions? I had two. One is I assume that this is going to change the planned date, or I'm assuming, yeah, it's going to change the planned date for installation. And should I assume that you all are working with Fieldhouse staff as to when this work will happen? I know there's a very busy schedule in particular time points in the year.
We are, yes. It gets a little more complicated than that. So there's a larger project that's going to be happening for FLAC that's going to be funded through some special grant money that's going to be coming through, which is going to replace the entire flooring inside of that building. We were actually on hold to complete the installation of the new bleachers until that flooring is actually complete. So we don't have any scheduling at that time as we're pending some information and I guess solidifying the funding source and also the scope of that project for the flooring.
I see. So if I'm understanding you correctly, these delays, not only is this with purchasing, but there's delays with because of the larger $8+ million of investment the state's doing in FLAC. And so this needs to be coordinated with that because obviously the bleachers go above the flooring.
Correct.
Placed as part of this. Okay. Which leads to my second question is there's been concerns expressed that these delays or these changing of dates, even though they are no change in funding amounts currently, the concern is that this will change the amount of materials costs with the vendor because of manufacturing, et cetera, and those costs going up. Everything seems to be going up. Is there do you all share that concern? Is this something we should be ready that this might increase these costs?
I think it depends on the extent of the delay. The majority of the change orders we've sent through so far are projects that are expected to be completed in the next 60 to 90 days. We don't expect those to have any changes in funding or cost. This particular one, I would say there's a question having, it really just depends on when we're going to do this project. And since we don't know yet, I think the potential is possibly there.
Okay. So Dr. Yarbrough, I'll just finish one question and come back to you in just 1 second. I just wanted to finish with this. My recommendation is to update the change order cover memo that meant to mention that this is the reasons for the delays is this is now connected to the separately funded $8+ million, much bigger renovations work happening, just so that anybody looks at this understands, differentiates it between other delays that we've talked about in previous meetings, but that this is delayed for a good reason because the state came through with bonded fund. I mean, with I think it was bonded funds for $8.5 million plus investment in Floyd Little, in addition to this investment that we're already putting in with capital funds. So I think that's a salient detail. And then I would recommend moving forward, if we do see some changes, that reminder that these delays were in part because it had to work, then it had to be coordinated with that work. And at the time when this was previously approved, while the district had been in the process of applying for that funding, we did not know we were getting that funding. So that's a key thing that's changed in the last month, is the results of the bonding stuff came through. Dr. Yarbrough, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, to kind of head off any potential increases, is there an option or is there a strategy for purchasing the materials now, even if the installation or work is done later? So just thinking about the things that can increase costs. I think I've seen material costs increase. There was also one document that I just viewed where the labor increased, but that was over a couple of years. But yes, is there a way to try to get the vendor to or the contractor to act such that cost increase are minimized, if not eliminated?
That is a absolute valid question, Dr. Yarbrough. I'll find out.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So hearing nothing else on that one, we'll drop back to the items that we moved to the end of the action item on the agenda. The first one I'd like to deal with is the amendment 5.3, which is an amendment to the agreement with SJ Services. And then we'll pick up and cover the renewal option 2 of 3 with ABM and the renewal option 2 of 3 with SJ Services. So starting with 5.3, and then as we get started with that, I see Mr. Carter is there, and I think we probably need, I think this is Mr. Carter's first attendance at this meeting, and so I suggest we have an introduction.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Carter. I am filling in for operations. I'd like to introduce this amendment 5.3 with SJ Services for part-time custodial service to increase funding amount from 5478259.25 by 500,000 in an amount not to exceed 5978259.25. The reason for this increase is for costs incurred with the overtime associated with Tier 1 events that there are no charge for those events, and also Tier 2 where the hourly rates are less than Tier 3, which is the private events. But these are events that are many times not scheduled, and we are notified on short notice, and we have to follow the union regulations on the number of staffing, not only with custodial, but also we even incur additional costs when it relates to security. What we'll be looking into this year is a way to minimize those unexpected special events, and a way to better cover the Tier 1 and Tier 2 charges, so that we don't have these costs that pile on after the fact, after the contract has been negotiated. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, thank you for sharing about this. I have 2 questions. My first question is, will you say more about unplanned events? Like, why were these unplanned, or kind of surprised is kind of how I take it?
Well, say there's one of the sports teams wins a event, they decide to have a celebration that week, or say there's some events that show up 2 to 3 weeks before our facilities are reserved. Go ahead.
Yep, I'll jump in here. Dr. Yarbrough, it's not so much of not being planned. It's more so if you look at the Tier 1 area, there's a number of things that are free as it relates to services. As we try to make sure we're supportive of the community, our students, and of the entities that we collaborate with. Although, you know, great intention, there is still a cost associated with that. So not necessarily unplanned, more so of, you know, a number of things that are happening that don't, you know, it's not a cost to the entity or whoever we're collaborating with. However, there is a cost as it relates to our district related to custodial services. The chart that I provided in the memo, you can go to chart number table 5 and 6, and you will be able to see the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 costs, and also I put the contextual information above that so that you know, you can kind of get an understanding of, you know, what we support as it relates to, you know, things that fall in tier 1, which is no cost, versus tier 2, tier 3. And our cost drivers related to the custodial hours and costs this year relate to, one, there was an increase just from contractual from last year to this year. That increase was 77 cents, you know, from last year per hour. The most impactful cost driver are the permitted event hours that are captured, with the field house being number 1, with over $200,000 and something, $200,000, $242,000, $964,000 as it relates to cost related to custodial services. We have Bowen Field and we have Crossfield. They also are costs related to custodial services. And then this is table 4 I'm looking at. Weekend permit hours. You can see there's a cost there as well as it relates to adult ed, cross, career, and Hill House. That grand total is $435,420. And I did more research just around, because the athletics, they do bring in revenue. So I wanted to see how much of that revenue actually comes back to, you know, feel some of the cost as it relates to custodial. And it's a very small drop in the bucket. So for the most where we eat the cost at a high number, I say 50, if that, per some research that I did. And that's not, you know, don't quote me on those numbers, but those are, you know, rough estimates. My point is that, you know, as it relates to the cost drivers, permitted hours is definitely a cost driver. And I did say within this memo that I'm not saying that that's solely it as it relates to this 500,000. There's definitely other things that we can do to improve. I'm not a person who'll come on here and say we're doing everything perfect, because we have a lot of work to do. But this is a cost driver as it relates to this particular topic.
Thank you. Thank you both for the walkthrough. Are all the hours the custodial team serves, let's say the permit hours here, are these all overtime hours or any of them within their contractual services?
No, so for SJ, they're part-time workers. SJ services are part-time workers, so it's not overtime. But it's the number of hours, no matter, you know, if we go through the roof with the numbers, you know, for hours, it's gonna cost us more. So if you look at table 3, it's broken down by hours. You can see how we fared last year versus how we fared this year. And you can see the difference in the last column to the right, which shows you that we increased in our hours every month with the exception of March. And the reason you don't see anything for 7/23, 7 and 8/23 is because SJ didn't start providing the services until the month of September. The vendor prior to us was providing services up until that time. But you can see the increase in hours, and chart 2 aligns with cost. So you can see the increase. And also, if you notice in chart 2, the month of October, that's the month where we start a lot of our after school activities and programs. So although, yes, great intent, we want to collaborate, we want to support, but it's a cost. And that's just talking about hours of custodian. Like, you have security costs. In addition to that, when you think about custodial costs, you got to think about supplies, because we do all of this, but like, it costs at the end of the day. So it's just, one of those cost drivers that I'm highlighting today.
Thank you. And for table 4, where you have the permit hours and the cost, are these, and you have the different locations, are these activities of our district, or these are activities of some of our community members and partners utilizing the facilities of the school system?
Yes, both. And depending on what it is, they may have to pay and they may not have to pay, depending on if they're falling at tier 1 or tier 2, tier 3. That's how it's situated. And there's not a actual custodian assigned to like Bowen Field and Cross, so it's like as needed. But it's still a cost. So we still have to provide those hours to, make sure that we're preparing for things. Take an example like graduation, right? We have, graduations at Bowen Field. We have graduations at the field house. We have graduations at Cross. Those hours, we have to prepare. We have to, do what we need to do to ensure that the facilities are presentable. In addition to that, think about when we open school, we keep so many of our buildings open in the summer. We're doing a better job this summer because Dr. Grone has been very intentional about ensuring that, hey, we have some of our buildings that are closed so that the deep cleaning can happen. In prior years, we've had most of our buildings open. So what happens, you get to August, everybody's like, well, the kids going to come back to a clean building. Well, you know what? That costs, because now everybody's going to be here working. Those hours add up, they add up. So just a couple of examples.
Okay, thank you very much. My last suggestion as it relates to this particular cost increase is that if there are options for some of our community partners to ask them to help cover this cost, particularly for those who may have the resources to contribute something, I think we should ask them and let them say no, but they might say yes to feed into these events, to help contribute to the payment of this $500,000. Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
All right, thank you. I had a few things here. One is, it occurred to me, I think, Dr. Finley, when you were talking about it, and I think it's something that you might want to add to this memo for an update to it before it's posted for the full board. One is, you brought up the enhanced programming, more after school, more summer programs, etc., which was the result of the extra funding and was not taken into consideration when this was put out for request for proposals. And so I don't know that that was accounted for in that. And it's, as was mentioned, it's a good thing to have more programming opportunities for the kids in the district, but it does increase these costs. So I think just mentioning that, in addition to the cost drivers of the external programs and things coming in, is the cost driver of the various enhanced programs. Because you mentioned the contract and permit event hours, but that some of it is for internal district stuff that was more than typical. Unfortunately, after the funding runs out, we're going to save a lot of money on these programs because we don't have a lot of funds in place to be able to afford as many after school programs and break programs, etc. So that's a separate conversation. The Second thing, I think one thing that's becoming clear is that I think, and this is a suggestion of Dr. Negron, we need to review again the charging for programs and events. And so my suggestion is we have this as a discussion item either at the next meeting or the August meeting to be able to take a look at what the current charging is. We might need to tinker with this, and we might need to change the free level to maybe have some sort of token amount, because everything adds up when you have a number of hours that I'm seeing on the charts and tables provided by Dr. Finley and Mr. Carter. But we should probably take a look at that. Yeah, and maybe these things need to be adjusted in light of these realities and make sure that we're charging enough in the, it's unfortunate, but we do have to pay, we have to stay within budget. So, so my suggestion is we take a look at that. And before I go to you, Dr. Negron, because I see your hand up, but I did want to, I have the question. I understand this. I appreciate the memo, the detailed memo, and I suggest if anybody has any questions, to please get them to the committee, Dr. Negron and Dr. Finley. If there's more information that needs to be added to this memo, other questions that come up, this is a good time to do it. But so we're finding out about, so this isn't it's a large amount contract. So by my math, this is like a 9.1% cost increase for this amendment, but it's on a large contract. So obviously the dollars are big while the percentage is not huge compared to some other things we've seen. And we're finding out about this in the last month of the fiscal year. And I'm just wondering why, and then what are we going to do different next year? And to that, I have a suggestion that I think we on the committee level can do, but I'm just like get an answer for those.
Yeah, so I did that's a great question, good question. So I did ask those particular questions. And from what I gathered, invoicing is going directly to the website, our link that we have to the finance department. And I'm not, what I'm gathering, it doesn't look like those invoices were making it to the facilities management team, but more so to the person who oversees the department. And that person's not here to speak to that. So that's what I've, uncovered at this particular moment, at this time. It is the role of the facilities management team, ABM, to manage the custodial talent that we do have in the district. To be very clear about that, what's happening moving forward, we are having weekly meetings with finance and operations and the vendor in the room. My goal, break down the walls. Let's all talk. We need everybody at the table. In addition to that, we have invoicing meetings, which is a separate meeting to get in front of the 20% problem that we're having, to ensure that we're doing a better job monitoring. On the flip side of that, I have communicated with SJ Services around how they're providing invoicing to us, because I was not pleased with it at all. So I have things, we do have things moving forward, monitoring and inspecting what we expect. It's definitely how we're moving forward and putting structures and systems in place. In addition to the invoicing meeting, we I've had ABM create an invoice tracker as well, so that we are on the same page and we can monitor what's going on, so that we can try to avoid these particular situations.
All right, thank you. And I think one thing that we should institute as a committee is, in the past, when we used a different vendor for part-time custodial, we had a unique arrangement where we prepaid for a certain number of hours each month, and then we would have quarterly reports just to make sure that we make sure folks were making sure that we didn't know them and they didn't know us in terms of those hours. And so I think what we should probably do is go back to kind of quarterly reports on that. We used to do it in conjunction with just the quarterly reports on food service budgets. So when we talk about our discussion items, I think our discussion item calendar, which is one of our discussion items, we'll talk about putting down so that there is a quarterly report on that to the committee, therefore to the board, just to make sure we're on track as far as that goes, so that if things are on a similar trajectory for next year, we'll at least be more aware of that. So that, I think, is some oversight to help with the plans that you've already discussed, Dr. Finley.
And just one last thing, we also creating a task force related to the permit hours, so that, you know, we have a team that's working collaboratively to decide what's what related to that particular data that we uncovered as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Negron, you had your hand up at one point, but now it's down.
I'm gonna pass.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions related to this? Okay. I'm going to take another look at the memo between tonight and tomorrow, Dr. Finley and Mr. Carter, and if I have any comments or suggestions or further questions, I will get that to you before this time tomorrow, preferably in the morning, just so that there's time. So I'm going to do that. I request everybody else do the same. And okay, so that was the past. So let's talk about the future, which is the renewal of contracts. The first one is 4.8, the renewal option 2 of 3 of the agreement with ABM. So Dr. Finley, Mr. Carter.
Yes, thank you. This contract 2023-3CON-0515 is for the extension of the ABM Industry Group LLC contract. At this time, we recommend the exercise of the contract option for 1 year, fiscal year 2024 to 2025. The reason for this recommendation is to renew the contract to avoid a disruption of services and to provide ample time to conduct the RFP process during the 2024-2025 school year without a rush. Renewing the ABM contract for the 5th year will provide several benefits. One, continuity of operational services to New Haven Public Schools for the vendor for the contract year. The opportunity to review and consider revisions to existing contract terms and performance metrics. The opportunity to review and consider potential opportunities for some or all positions within the vendor contract to potentially become in HPS positions. An appropriate time to implement the RFP process without rush, and gives time for the Board of Education to thoroughly review and approve policies necessary to safeguard the district. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Comments or questions?
Yes.
Dr. Yarbrough.
No questions yet.
Oh, no questions yet?
Yeah.
So a question I have is, so I appreciate the memos provided for this and for the SJ contract renewals. I agree that these are 2 key areas. We can't have this, we have to have continuity of service. We've been discussing some issues, not just with this, but with some other ones related to change orders arriving late and without warning. And so I'm wondering, is there something in our current contract or something in the discussions you all have had with ABM to ensure that there'll be more timely warnings of when we're going to have cost overruns? I think a lot of the cost overruns are, we are severely underfunded and we don't put enough money towards these things. And so cost overruns are just going to be the nature of things, because we're going to have things break in aging buildings. We're going to have vandalism, which, are issues as well that we've discussed in previous meetings. So I think there's just some things that these are going to be happening. The question is, how are we going to have more timely awareness of this through?
So, Mr. Wilcox, definitely we are working to be more timely with communication. I have had dialogue with ABM, and that's a reason for the invoice meetings. In addition to that, making sure that the collaboration is there, making sure that the conversations are happening between the right people, and we're following up when we come back to meetings week after week after week, is extremely important. One other thing that we have done, what I noticed when I looked closely at projects that we had going on, and I looked closely at our own hall contracts, and what was missing was who's responsible. As it relates to managing each particular piece within the contract. So we have within that tracker that we created, we know who's responsible now for everything within what ABM is overseeing and what they're monitoring. And that's how we are going to collaboration and clear understanding around who's responsible for what, so that we can make sure that we're maximizing the contract that we have with the vendor moving forward. So those are just a couple of things that we're doing to try to make sure that continuous improvement happens.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, thank you. One of the things that has been mentioned that I would have liked to have seen with this renewal request for a year are just the performance metrics. And I know we're talking about them now, but having that evaluation to be able to say this is how, so in addition to the statement that the vendor has, what's the statement say? That the vendor has met all obligations under the agreement, really fleshing that out and spelling out how things have gone. And there is a 4% increase. Is that right? It says, okay, yeah, I guess just according to what was initially agreed to is what it's saying. So we're paying more. So I would want to have that information in place for us. So since it's been mentioned, I definitely would like for us to do it. And then the other piece is, we invest a lot of money into our relationships with professionals, and it should be clarified very early who is doing what. That should not be something that stays unclear for very long. So we have to kind of do better in that area, whether it's on our end or the vendor making sure that everything is clear in terms of who is doing what, when, and what the feedback loop is going to be. That's something that's been accomplished. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I guess my final thing on this is just want to say that we could also create space in Finance and Operations Committee meetings through discussion items, just to have general discussion about where things are going in terms of change orders, increasing costs on things, where things are at. Everything is typically done on particular items, which might not give space overall to kind of sit back and go, well, things are going pretty good, but we can already see that we're going to probably have some issues based on this with this vendor or that vendor, just in terms of we're burning through the painting contracts, et cetera. So if at any point people want time on the discussion calendar to talk about concerns, looming issues, or things that we need to just make sure the committee and the board is aware of, happy to create space for that. Since so much is tied to individual spending items, sometimes we don't have the space unless we create it. Dr. Yarbrough, you had another comment?
Yes, just that I would support that. And I think at one point there was a conversation about or maybe I'm making this up, about having some kind of dashboard, public to us or to the district, that just shows, what is the budget for this particular item and where are we now at any given moment, um, in utilizing that budget. I agree, let's have these regular updates, minimize surprises so that we have a sense of what we're doing, where we're going.
Right, thank you. Anything else on this item? Hearing nothing, we'll go ahead and talk about 4.9, the renewal of the agreement with SJ Services.
Yes. The recommendation is to renew the contract option for SJ Services for part-time custodial services for the fiscal year 2024-25 to avoid a disruption of services and to provide ample time for us to conduct the RFP process during the year without a rush. And again, renewing the SJ Services contract for the fiscal year will provide the same benefits on the previous contract. One, continuity of operational services, the opportunity to review and consider revisions, and also gives us appropriate time to implement the RFP process without rush. I think the increase is less than 2% over the previous year, but we recommend the exercise of the option so that we can have continuity of services at this time.
Great, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Dr. Yarper.
Thank you. I do request for kind of both of the items that sometime in the near future, we are told, the committee is told some sort of timeline for when a review will happen, when a new RFP process will happen if chosen, because I don't want to be at this place at this time next year saying we don't want to rush the process and it's too late. We're at jeopardy of introducing discontinuity in service. Yes, so I would like to know kind of what is that timeline for us that would ensure that if we do want to go out to bid or some kind of way modify what we're doing, that we have ample time to do it and are not rushed doing it. And for this particular SJ Services, thank you for walking us through what this 1-year renewal would be.
All right, I'll just agree with you, Dr. Yarborough, on the need for an update on the timeline and things. I think we'll just add in a discussion item for this maybe in one of our September meetings, since that's probably when they'll have a sense of what people are wanting to do. And this is something that using the transportation contract as an example, those were things we were getting updates, I think, in October as to what the plan was. And then we had updates along the process. So but we'll just put it in there as an October, which we could move to a September update as to what the plans are. And then we can adjust it if it needs to be, but we'll just pencil it in for that. So I think you've answered a lot of the questions I had specific to this also when we were discussing the amendments. So I don't think I have anything specific at this time, this one. So, because you've already answered a lot. So hearing nothing else on this, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. And as I'm making the motion, just a reminder that items 5.1 and 5.2 are not part of this motion. So these were withdrawn for now, and we'll hear about them presumably in a future meeting. So that's accepting 5.1 and 5.2. So I move that we send to the full board with the recommendation to approve these 5 abstracts, these 9 agreements, the amendment 5.3 and 5.4, the 8 purchase orders, the 2 contracts, and the 2 change orders.
A second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so those items move. Looking at the discussion items, I'll just provide a quick update and then somebody else can if they want to, but for the procurement policy update, I was part of a meeting last week with various people from city purchasing, the school district, corporation counsel's office, talking about updating our, I think it's a 2020 purchasing policy to bring it more in line with the city purchasing policy. I think it was a good meeting. There's a subgroup that's going to be working on things over the next few weeks. The timeline that was discussed was trying to have the work done in the month of July so that it could be presented to the committee and then the board in the month of August. So that's the timeline on that. I think the consensus was working with the existing policy, not like throwing it away, but going through the updates. The draft we're using was the last posted draft for finance and operations meetings. So that's where that is. I don't know if anybody else that was part of that wants to add anything, or did I kind of cover the highlights? Covered the highlights? Okay. Just also had on here a reminder, we have an MOU with the city of New Haven to provide some, we pay for some positions in corporation counsel's office and the purchasing office. The MOU has expired, needs to be redone. I'm just wondering if there's a timeline on when we'll be seeing it. I believe we saw it in the month of July last year. So just wanted to make sure that's on everybody's radar. Okay, so it's something we might want to get done maybe at the next meeting, or we'll have this as a discussion item also if it's not an action item, just so we can see where it's at. And then finally, the discussion calendar is, I'm doing yet another, we'll put together a discussion calendar for the remaining Finance and Operations Committee meetings for the rest of 2024. Be pulling that together with Ms. DeMayo's assistance, and I will present that at our next meeting. If there's anything people want on there, please let me know. We can talk about where to add it and where to slot it in. This will just be a draft when you see it. So some things can move around in addition to our typical things that we have, like the second meeting of each month, having a monthly report on finances. We'll have the things we discussed, a quarterly report on where part-time custodial is, so that we can keep better track of that as we move forward. And a couple other things I've been adding to a list that have come up in board meetings of what people want. And it seems there was one more. An overview of special education things was another item that was discussed in this meeting, having in a future discussion item. Any comments or questions related to that? So please send that information to the committee and to the superintendent and Ms. DeMayo if you have suggestions on what needs to be added to that calendar. Okay. That is the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second it. How do you vote, sir?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a good evening.